The lie was $93 trillion large. That single, impossible figure, the estimated cost of her signature fantasy, was the silent guest at the center of the NBC special event. America's economic future, a debate. It was the number that would define the entire evening. The tangible monument to performance politics. For 6 years, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had built an empire on righteous indignation and impossible demands. Convinced that emotional appeal could negate economic reality. Tonight, J.D. Vance, the vice president, was there to apply the cold, hard logic of compound interest and legislative impossibility to her carefully constructed brand. She arrived, as always, radiating the practiced confidence of a social justice icon, the former bartender, the working-class champion, whose every utterance was a rallying cry against the elite. She was prepared for a rhetorical war, a battle of soundbites and passionate delivery. What she was utterly unprepared for was an audit. Vance, by contrast, arrived as the relentless fact-checker, a Marine veteran who understood the difference between a mission and a metaphor. A Yale law graduate who understood that evidence always trumps aesthetics. He had the quiet authority of someone who had faced actual scarcity. Not just tweeted about it from a $2,800 per month luxury apartment. His presence alone was an indictment, the living proof that merit, discipline, and hard-earned education were the true escape routes from poverty, not self-curated outrage. The debate's opening was brief. The veneer of civility quickly shattered. Ocasio-Cortez gave her standard, rousing address, a tribute to her own political origin story that culminated in a demand for radical, immediate economic restructuring. The applause was thunderous, an echo chamber affirming its own self-belief. Vance's response was a masterpiece of political deceleration. He did not raise his voice, he lowered the intellectual boom. The Congresswoman speaks with admirable fervor about the working class. I respect that fervor. I respect the passion. But I reject the premise that performance replaces policy. As someone who, unlike the Congresswoman, actually grew up in profound poverty, not the middle-class comfort of Westchester County, I can confirm that the poor suffer most when leaders mistake economic arithmetic for ideological theater. You hold an economics degree, Congresswoman. I hold a $14 page analysis showing that you've systematically ignored everything that degree was supposed to teach you. The vice president's attack was immediate and devastating. He skipped the usual political posturing and went straight for the jugular, her academic credibility. Let us deal with the $2011 Boston University degree. Congresswoman, 8 years of professional dormancy followed its acquisition. You chose not to work in economics. You chose not to work in policy. Then, you entered Congress and proposed the Green New Deal, a program whose cost, $93 trillion, is more than double all the revenue the U.S. government expects to collect in a decade. This is not economics, Congresswoman. It is a mathematical dereliction of duty. You are proposing to spend money that literally does not exist. Why should the American people trust your judgment on fiscal matters when you propose figures that defy the foundational arithmetic taught in the institution you constantly cite? He then introduced external evidence, the most damning of which were quotes from prominent Democratic and liberal economists. When the most respected figures in your own political camp, figures who want climate action, call your central proposal not serious policy. It proves that the issue isn't partisanship. The issue is your complete, willful inability to translate social media slogans into feasible policy. Your degree is a prop. Your economic plans are fantasies. The American people, particularly the working class, deserve a leader who understands how to build prosperity, not simply how to spend away the national future. The destruction of her academic authority was total, setting the stage for the demolition of her political record. The vice president, having effectively neutralized the Boston University degree as a valid credential, did not pause to allow a defensive rally. He moved immediately to the logical consequence of her academic negligence, her inability to recognize and engage with fundamental trade-offs. The core function of an economist, Congresswoman, is to manage scarcity and analyze trade-offs, Vance asserted, pushing the technical critique deeper. Yet, your Green New Deal, and frankly, every major policy initiative you have championed, demonstrates a profound, almost intentional, ignorance of both. Take, for instance, your commitment to the immediate cessation of all fossil fuel consumption. This is not a moral stand, but an engineering impossibility. Current energy infrastructure, from generation to transmission, is built upon $150 years of development. You are proposing to dismantle $60% of the nation's energy supply in $10 years without the physical capacity, raw materials, or trained workforce to replace it. Engineers confirm this timeline defies physics. When you propose the impossible, you are not being bold, you are demonstrating a fundamental lack of respect for the limits of reality. Vance pulled out a document that appeared to be a detailed legislative analysis. Furthermore, let us dissect the concept of guaranteed economic security for those unwilling to work. This clause, which you proudly featured in the initial rollout of your Green New Deal, is not a social safety net, it is an economic paradox. When you delink effort from reward on a national scale, you do not elevate the poor. You destroy the incentives that create the wealth necessary to fund social programs in the first place. You disincentivize labor. This is not progressive policy. This is the intellectual error of utopian socialism, a concept discredited since the $19 century. Your economics degree should have warned you against the catastrophic impact of such a policy on the labor market and fiscal solvency. Ocasio-Cortez attempted to interrupt, her voice carrying a sharp, emotional edge. We must provide for human dignity. The market is immoral. Vance stopped her with a controlled gesture. Human dignity, Congresswoman, is secured by a functioning economy that creates opportunity, not by a $93 trillion fantasy that ensures mass economic collapse. I know what it means to lack dignity. I lived it when my family relied on food stamps and the generosity of my grandparents. My dignity was restored not by a government handout for the unwilling, but by the hard-earned opportunity provided by the United States Marine Corps and meritocratic education. Your proposals do not fight for the poor, they merely romanticize a state of permanent dependence, a state which you have never experienced. The Vice President then moved to the fatal flaw in her legislative strategy: the inevitable collision between her rhetorical maximalism and political reality. The true measure of a legislator is their ability to translate vision into law, Vance stated, flipping to the section marked, "The Scorecard of Zero." In 6 years, you have been a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. You have generated millions of social media interactions, earned millions in speaking fees, and secured a global celebrity status. Yet, in that same period, your legislative output is virtually non-existent. 0 major bills sponsored that became law. 0 legislative achievements that tangibly improved the economic lot of your constituents. When your own party, the Democrats, refused to vote for your signature Green New Deal. When leadership, Speaker Pelosi, mocked it as the Green Dream or whatever. It was not because they feared you were too bold. It was because they knew your proposals were structurally unserious, mathematically impossible, and politically toxic. Vance leaned into the microphone, his tone now carrying the weight of executive authority. You are not a legislator, Congresswoman. You are a political performer. Your value to the progressive movement is not in your ability to govern, but in your capacity to generate outrage and content. You have confused an audience for a constituency. The American people, and specifically your struggling constituents in Queens, did not elect a social media influencer. They elected a representative tasked with the difficult, unglamorous work of making laws. 6 years, millions of followers, 0 laws passed. That, Congresswoman, is the statistical definition of legislative failure. The silence that followed was profound. The realization sinking in that her entire career, her academic foundation, her policy proposals, and her legislative record had been systematically reduced to a performance art devoid of tangible, positive impact. Having decisively neutralized the Congresswoman's academic credentials and reduced her legislative record to the scorecard of 0, Vice President Vance initiated the second, and arguably more emotionally potent, phase of his strategic demolition, the unmasking of the political brand itself. He recognized that her power lay not in policy, but in performance, and his objective was to expose the profound, irreconcilable gap between her proclaimed working-class identity and her actual elite lifestyle. Vance flipped his folder to the section marked, "The Champagne Socialist Portfolio," his posture shifting from the academic rigidity of the economist to the cold precision of the prosecutor. His voice, measured and low, cut through the tense silence of the auditorium. "Let us move now from the impossible math of your $93 trillion fantasies to the undeniable arithmetic of your personal hypocrisy. Your political success is entirely predicated on a single, compelling narrative: the former working-class bartender, the authentic champion of the people, fighting the $1% dollar." He paused, then delivered the crucial counter-evidence. The peak of this narrative's grotesque contradiction occurred on September 13 th. 2021 at the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Met Gala. Here, we have the self-proclaimed anti-capitalist revolutionary attending one of the most exclusive, hyper-elitist, and conspicuously consumptive social gatherings on the planet. A single ticket to this event, Congresswoman, costs approximately $35.000. Let me emphasize that figure. That is the median annual income for an entire American working family, spent for one person to attend a single night of social theater. Vance held up a massive printout of the photograph, focusing on the custom-made white gown emblazoned with the words, "Tax the rich." You wore a political costume, and that is what it was. A costume, bearing a slogan. You claimed you were making a statement. But what was the true cost of that statement? Beyond the ethical? The designer of this custom creation, Aurora James, was simultaneously facing documentation showing her companies owed over $100 in various tax liabilities and unpaid wages to her own staff. The irony, Congresswoman, is so thick it borders on political satire. You wore a "tax the rich" dress, made by someone who demonstrably refused to pay taxes, to a party that cost more than your average constituent earns in a year. This is not solidarity with the working class. This is the elite engaging in performance art while exploiting the very mechanisms, wage and tax evasion, they pretend to deplore. You were not fighting the elite, you were dressing up as a rebel for their amusement. The vice president transitioned seamlessly to the economics of her daily life. Contrasting her brand with her reality, he displayed a composite graphic. On one side, a grainy photo of her campaigning in a working-class neighborhood, on the other, a high-gloss photo of the amenities at her D.C. residence. Your entire working-class aesthetic is further demolished by the realities of your current lifestyle. You claim the mantle of the oppressed, yet you reside in the Yards, a luxury apartment complex in Washington, D.C.'s exclusive Navy Yard district. Your rent is estimated to be approximately $2.800 per month, a figure you pay for a solo apartment. The median rent for a family unit in your own district in Queens is substantially lower. You are spending thousands more than your constituents to live in a building that boasts a concierge, a state-of-the-art fitness center, a high-end pet spa, and a rooftop pool. You tweet about the crisis of affordable housing from the comfort of a building designed for the professional elite. This is not merely hypocrisy, It is a profound ethical disconnect where luxury consumption is masked by political sloganeering. Vance then broadened the financial scope of the indictment, moving beyond housing to apparel and assets. We must also address the recurring issue of your curated wardrobe. While you relentlessly attack the $1% your public appearances are frequently analyzed by fashion bloggers. Not for their frugality, but for their cost. Custom-tailored suits, designer accessories, expensive eyewear. A wardrobe that is perpetually tracked because its monetary value is high enough to be newsworthy. Furthermore, public records and old social media posts, which you subsequently attempted to delete, I might add, reveal that you previously drove a Tesla, a vehicle costing upwards of $60,000. You, the great socialist, drove a luxury electric vehicle that cost more than the annual earnings of 2 working-class families combined, all while lecturing America on the evils of capitalism. He looked directly at her, his voice hardening. I grew up in a house where the concept of a pet spa was an unimaginable fantasy. My mother's addiction meant we were genuinely poor, often struggling to keep the lights on. I remember the pervasive, humiliating weight of true economic hardship. When I achieved success, I invested in my community and chose to live modestly, precisely because I have the memory of what poverty does to a human soul. You, Congresswoman, grew up in the comfort of Westchester County, an upper-middle-class enclave, where your family owned property and could afford to send you to Boston University. You have appropriated the trauma of the working class for political gain. You perform poverty while living the bourgeoisie lifestyle. The Met Gala and the luxury apartment are not outliers. They're the evidence of your conversion to the very elite class you pretend to oppose. Vance delivered the psychological hammer blow, focusing on the motivation behind the constant performance. Your brand requires you to be permanently in the role of the victimized, perpetually oppressed rebel, but your financial decisions, your housing choices, and your social engagements reveal the truth. You value the aesthetic of resistance over the substance of sacrifice. You are willing to wear a slogan, but you are unwilling to live the reality you champion. That is why your proposals are $93 trillion fantasies, because real policy requires hard, unglamorous compromises, and that does not generate the necessary social media engagement to sustain the AOC brand. He concluded the segment with a devastating summation of her inauthenticity, linking her personal choices back to her legislative failures. The gap between the AOC brand and the AOC reality is the defining feature of your political career. You are a political influencer whose primary product is righteous anger and emotional performance. You have perfected the art of generating revenue and celebrity by using the working class as a human shield and an aesthetic backdrop. The Met Gala dress was not a statement against the rich, it was a $35 sign advertising your own elevation into the club. And the people you claim to represent are left footing the bill for the very real economic damage caused by your career of performance without principle. The audience, now completely polarized between stunned silence and murmurs of assent, had witnessed the definitive unmasking of the political phenomenon, the revelation that the working-class hero was fundamentally a luxury brand, expertly managed but entirely devoid of the substance it claimed to represent. Vice President Vance, having executed the demolition of the Congresswoman's personal brand and credentials, moved from theoretical critique to the tangible, quantifiable damage inflicted upon her own constituents. This segment, focusing on the disastrous cancellation of the Amazon HQ2 project, represented the shift from exposing hypocrisy to proving economic sabotage. Vance reorganized the documents on his podium, pulling out what appeared to be detailed economic impact studies and internal Amazon correspondence, marked, Operations Self-Inflicted Wound. His voice, previously measured in academic critique, now carried the heavy, moralizing weight of accountability. We have established, Congresswoman, That your policy proposals are economically illiterate and your lifestyle is fundamentally hypocritical. Now, we must confront the most devastating and quantifiable outcome of your performance politics: the intentional destruction of economic opportunity in the very district you were elected to represent. We are discussing the Amazon HQ2 debacle in Long Island City, Queens. Vance laid out the undeniable facts, presented with clinical precision. In 2018 dollars, Amazon announced plans for a second headquarters, HQ2, to be built in your district, creating between $25 to $40 jobs. The estimated average salary for these jobs was math BF $150 per year. In exchange, the state of New York offered math BF $3 text billion in performance-based tax incentives, crucially, incentives that would only be realized after Amazon created the jobs and generated tax revenue. This was not a cash handout, it was an agreement not to collect taxes on economic activity that did not yet exist. He then launched into the economic calculation, slowing down the pace to emphasize the simple arithmetic his opponent had allegedly failed to grasp. Let us put aside the ideological noise and look at the basic math. Congresswoman, math BF, $25.000 jobs multiplied by an average salary of math BF, $150 means math BF, $3.75 text billion in new annual wages poured into the New York economy. Over $10 years. That is math BF, $37.50 text billion in wages alone. The total projected new state and local tax revenue from property taxes, sales taxes, and personal income taxes over the same decade was conservatively estimated at math BF $8 text billion. The state agreed to forego math BF $3 text billion in incentives. Math BF $8 text billion in new revenue minus math BF $3 text billion in foregone revenue leaves a math BF $5 text billion net gain for New York. You celebrated saving $3 billion that was never real money, while costing your constituents math BF $5 text billion in actual measurable revenue. Vance held up a series of local polls and community sentiment reports. Furthermore, you claimed these were only corporate elite jobs that would drive gentrification. This is yet another lie exposed by the data. Amazon's commitment included thousands of jobs across the income spectrum: facilities managers, HR staff, security personnel, administrative assistants, and the entire ecosystem of service workers necessary to support a major corporate campus. Polls conducted in the area showed that $70% of Queens residents and $56% of your own district residents supported the deal. Your constituents wanted those jobs. Congresswoman, they wanted the opportunity, the investment, the economic multiplier effect. The vice president's tone became one of genuine bewilderment mixed with moral outrage. You, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the self-proclaimed defender of the working poor, actively campaigned to kill this project. You used your platform, your outrage machine, and your social media following to force a company to withdraw an estimated math BF $50.000 total jobs, math BF $25.000 direct, and an estimated math BF $25.000 in direct service and retail jobs from the community that needed them most. Why? Because the narrative of stopping the big, bad corporation was more valuable to your political brand than delivering tangible economic relief to the people you represent. You prioritized a viral tweet over a middle-class future for thousands of families. Vance then contrasted her destructive actions with his own record of economic engagement. "I spent my career, both in business and now in public office, actively fighting to bring investment to communities ravaged by globalization and neglect, to places like Middletown, Ohio, and throughout Appalachia and the Rust Belt. I worked across the aisle and across corporate lines to deliver jobs and opportunity to people who desperately needed them. My philosophy is simple: you create a stable environment, you offer performance-based incentives, and you unleash the forces of job creation. Your philosophy is simple. 2. Find a villain, use outrage, and ensure economic activity is strangled if it doesn't fit your purity test. The difference, Congresswoman, is that my actions generate jobs, and yours eliminate them." He presented the subsequent economic studies outlining the true cost of her action. What happened after Amazon left? The anticipated property tax revenue for schools and municipal services vanished. The expected growth in supporting small businesses, restaurants, retail, housing developers, was aborted. The community was left with precisely the economic stagnation you claimed to be fighting against. You did not save Queens from gentrification. You saved Queens from opportunity. You saved it from $150 salaries. You saved it from $5 billion in net revenue. You sold your constituents' economic future for the price of a political soundbite. Vance drove the indictment to its inescapable conclusion, reframing her political identity. This is the defining act of your congressional tenure. This is not legislative failure, this is economic sabotage. You took a community that wanted and needed $50 jobs and, using your media profile, single-handedly ensured those jobs were killed. You are not a defender of the working class. You are an agent of economic destruction who uses your constituents' poverty as a pedestal for your own elite celebrity. Your lack of economic competence, the very thing your degree should have prevented, cost thousands of real, struggling New Yorkers their chance at prosperity. The Amazon HQ2 reversal is the perfect, tragic monument to the cost of performance over principle. The evidence was overwhelming. Backed by verifiable fiscal reports and polling data, the Congresswoman had no factual defense against the charge of economic self-destruction. Her attempted response, pivoting back to the vague danger of corporate control, was easily dismissed by Vance's final, devastating question. Did the working people of Queens ask you to choose an ideological purity test over $50 jobs, Congresswoman? Or did you make that choice alone, from your luxury apartment, for the benefit of your Instagram engagement? Vice President Vance's systematic deconstruction of the Congresswoman's career now reached its darkest, most personal juncture. Having established her legislative failure, economic sabotage, and lifestyle hypocrisy, he moved to the ultimate moral indictment, the cynical exploitation of her own family for political theater. He flipped the folder to a section marked, "The Abuela Incident, Performance over Kinship." Congresswoman, we have reviewed your record of zero legislative accomplishments and your decision to kill $50 jobs in the name of a purity test. We have seen the hypocrisy of your Met Gala costume. But perhaps the most morally bankrupt chapter of your career concerns the person who should be most sacred to you, your grandmother in Puerto Rico. Vance displayed a series of screenshots and accompanying photographs from June 2021. In June 2021, you posted a series of dramatic photographs of your grandmother's home in Puerto Rico, showcasing water damage and deteriorating conditions. You used these images for a singular, explicit political purpose, to attack the previous administration's response to Hurricane Maria, claiming 4 years later that the failure was due to corruption and neglect. You leveraged the suffering of your own family member, your abuela, as a political prop to generate viral outrage and score cheap partisan points. The vice president's voice grew stern, infused with personal experience. Any decent person seeing those images would feel a moral obligation to help. particularly a granddaughter making a congressional salary of Math BF, $174 per year. And help was offered. Specifically, a conservative commentator, Matt Walsh, launched a GoFundMe campaign, not to mock you, but to genuinely raise funds to repair the very damage you had so dramatically showcased. That campaign rapidly raised over $100 from Americans across the political spectrum, people who, despite disagreeing with your politics, saw human need and responded with compassion. That is the American spirit, Congresswoman, a spirit of charity and common human decency. Vance's gaze was unflinching. And what did you do with this genuine outpouring of generosity? You refused it. You rejected the $100 donation, dismissing it as a right-wing stunt and in poor taste. You actively blocked $100 in concrete assistance to your struggling grandmother because the aid did not originate from the politically correct source. You prioritized maintaining your victim narrative, your political performance, over the immediate, tangible well-being of your own blood relative. He then delivered the ethical trap. Let us follow the timeline. Congresswoman, you publicized your grandmother's desperate condition for political gain. You then rejected the significant financial aid offered by the public for political reasons. The logical, moral next step, the only step required of a person with your salary and claimed values, was to fix the damage yourself. You make Math BF, $174 annually. You live in a luxury apartment costing $2.800 a month. You spend thousands on designer clothing. You could have easily paid for those repairs with a single month's salary. Or certainly, without resorting to public campaigns. Vance pulled out investigative reports that followed the incident. However, subsequent investigations revealed no evidence that you personally funded or oversaw the necessary repairs. The story evaporated once the political capital was extracted. You used your grandmother's suffering to attack a political opponent, rejected a six-figure sum intended to help her, and then, based on all available evidence, appear to have simply moved on to the next viral tweet. This is not political maneuvering. This is a profound moral failure. You exploited your family's plight as a political prop, refused assistance when it was offered, and failed to deliver the required relief yourself. You chose politics over kinship. The vice president compared this calculated detachment to the values forged in his own poverty. In my book, Hillbilly Elegy, I write about my grandmother. Mama, she was my rock. She raised me when my mother was struggling with addiction. My success was her success. And when I earned the means, my absolute first priority was ensuring her comfort and security. That is the definition of family responsibility. You do not use your grandmother's suffering to generate clicks. You use your success to alleviate that suffering. He summarized the moral charge with cold finality. This incident tells America everything it needs to know about your true priorities. When faced with a choice between maintaining your carefully constructed narrative of victimhood and accepting help for your grandmother, you chose the narrative. When faced with the choice between spending your luxury apartment rent on a family repair and maintaining your elite lifestyle, you chose the lifestyle. You are so committed to the performance of righteous struggle that you are willing to let your own family continue struggling if it benefits your political brand. If you are willing to exploit the vulnerability of your own grandmother for political gain. What is the moral limit to your political opportunism? The answer, Congresswoman, is that there is none. The indictment was complete. A systematic demolition that went beyond policy and economics, striking at the core of personal character and moral decency. The room was dominated by the chilling understanding that the political celebrity on the stage was willing to sacrifice personal integrity and family well-being for the relentless maintenance of the AOC brand. The vice president, having delivered the moral indictment, moved to the ultimate measure of her professional existence, her political efficacy. The focus shifted from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's individual failures to the collective legislative impotence of her political faction. Often dubbed the Squad, this segment was designed to prove that her celebrity was a distraction, not a tool for governance. Vance pulled out a detailed comparative legislative analysis, meticulously tabbed, marked, the influencer cohort, $14 million followers, 0 laws. His tone, though still cutting, adopted the weary authority of a statesman observing a catastrophic waste of institutional resource. Congresswoman, you are not an isolated figure in this performance-based political economy. You are the most prominent member of a highly visible, hyper-engaged cohort, the Squad. This group, including yourself, Congresswoman Omar, Congresswoman Tlaib, and others, has been in office collectively for approximately math BF, $16 years. The promise of this group was a radical shift in American policy, driven by uncompromising ideological purity and media amplification. Let us now examine the return on investment for the voters who sent you to Washington. Vance laid out the numbers that quantified the failure. Total pieces of major legislation sponsored by the Squad that have been successfully passed and signed into law since 2019. 0. Total legislative victories delivering quantifiable economic benefits to their respective districts. 0. Total bills that have even survived a floor vote in the House without massive immediate compromise. Essentially 0. Your collective legislative achievement, Congresswoman, is mathematically indistinguishable from that of a single first-term intern. He then dissected the legislative strategy itself, arguing that their uncompromising stance was a deliberate choice for performance over results. Your political playbook dictates that legislation must be perfect, that it must adhere to the maximalist demands of your social media base, or it must be opposed entirely. This ideological purity, while earning you retweets and praise from activist circles, renders you entirely ineffective within the actual mechanisms of governance. You, and your cohort, voted against crucial, bipartisan bills, not because they were detrimental to your constituents, but because they were not pure enough. Vance held up the voting record on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Take the bipartisan infrastructure law, a bill that authorized billions for rebuilding actual roads, bridges, water pipes, and expanding broadband access into underserved communities, including portions of your own district. This was a tangible deliverable for the working class. Yet, you voted against it. You opposed $550 billion in new federal investment that would have created thousands of construction jobs, accelerated economic growth, and modernized critical infrastructure, all because the bill was not a component of your unfeasible $93 trillion Green New Deal fantasy. You chose a loud, principled no over a quiet, beneficial yes. This is not leadership. It is political self-immolation for the sake of brand maintenance. He drew a sharp contrast with his own approach. I have spent my time in the Senate and now as Vice President focusing on the unglamorous, difficult work of compromise, of securing real investment for Ohio, of passing legislation that tackles issues like the opioid crisis and bringing manufacturing jobs back. We seek outcomes. You seek outrage. The difference is stark. I govern, you perform. My approach yields jobs and infrastructure. Yours yields viral video clips and 0 laws. Vance then focused on the internal political damage wrought by the Squad's tactics. Your uncompromising style has not only failed to produce laws but has also alienated you from the core power structure of your own party. You are not a power broker, Congresswoman. You are a backbencher. Your own leadership, including former Speaker Pelosi, openly mocked your proposals. You and your cohort were consistently denied key committee assignments, not due to ideological disagreement, but due to your demonstrated inability to work within the institutional framework. You have confused visibility with influence. The institution of the U.S. Congress has effectively isolated you because you are better at generating antagonism than achieving consensus. Your influence is limited entirely to the cultural sphere, in the legislative arena. You are a political eunuch. He presented the final, crushing statistical comparison, emphasizing the metrics of celebrity versus the metrics of governance. You and your squad members collectively command nearly math BF, $14 million followers across social media platforms. That is an enormous cultural footprint. But when we compare that digital engagement to the tangible, physical impact on the lives of your constituents, jobs created, laws passed, problems solved, the ratio is chilling. Math BF, $14 million followers to 0 legislative wins. You have maximized your personal brand at the expense of your professional mandate. The people who suffer are the working-class families in your districts who were promised a revolution and received only a relentless stream of content. Vance concluded the indictment of her political ineffectiveness by redefining her role in the American political system. You are not a legislator, Congresswoman. You are a highly paid, government-subsidized social media influencer who utilizes an official congressional platform to generate personal celebrity and revenue. You have prioritized the $8 soundbite over the $100 page bill. The failure of the squad is the perfect encapsulation of modern progressive politics: all style, no substance, all brand, no governance, and the American people, tired of the performance, are now demanding accountability for the math BF, $16 collective years of wasted opportunity and 0 results. Vice President Vance now transitioned to the segment intended to solidify his victory not just on policy, but on the fundamental question of authenticity and earned authority. He sought to contrast his path, a brutal climb out of genuine poverty via established meritocratic channels, with Ocasio-Cortez's trajectory, a comfortable middle-class upbringing leveraged by media performance. He organized the evidence into 2 distinct timelines, marked, "The Tale of 2 Trajectories." Congresswoman, we have spent 5 segments meticulously cataloging the failures of your professional career, the unused economics degree, the math BF, $93 trillion fantasy, the math BF, $50.000 jobs killed in your district, the Met Gala hypocrisy, and the exploitation of your own grandmother. Now, we must address the philosophical core of this entire debate, the chasm between authentic achievement and privileged performance. Vance laid out the facts of his own ascent with deliberate humility, allowing the facts to indict her narrative. I was born into generational, debilitating poverty in the heart of Appalachia, Middletown, Ohio, and Jackson, Kentucky. My mother struggled with severe drug addiction. My family relied on the tenuous security of my grandparents' minimal income. We were poor. My dad was an architect in Westchester County, poor. But genuinely, existentially poor. My escape route was not a political platform, it was the United States Marine Corps. I enlisted, I served, I earned the GI Bill. I used that discipline and that hard-earned benefit to attend college. Then graduated from Yale Law School. I then went into business, invested in communities that looked like mine, creating jobs and opportunity where there was none. I earned my way to the Senate, and now to the vice presidency. My authority to speak on poverty and economic development is derived from a trajectory of merit, sacrifice, and results. He then flipped the focus to the contrasting timeline, exposing the comfortable foundation beneath her working-class brand. Now, let us examine the reality of your origin story, which you continuously market as a tale of hardship. Your family resided in Yorktown Heights, Westchester County, New York. Property records confirm that the median home price in that area during your upbringing was over math BF, $400. Your father was an architect. You attended Yorktown High School, one of the top-rated public schools in New York. You were then afforded the opportunity to attend Boston University, a prestigious, expensive private institution. This is not the crushing, generational poverty of the Rust Belt. This is the comfortable, cushioned privilege of the upper middle-class suburb. Vance drove the point home, reframing her single working-class experience, bartending, as an anomaly rather than a life-defining struggle. You did, for 8 years, work as a bartender. I respect that honest work. But that experience, which you constantly deploy as a Purple Heart of class struggle, was a temporary stopgap before you leveraged your elite education into a political career. It was an interlude. For me, poverty was the beginning and the central crisis of my life. For you, it was a marketable anecdote. I am someone who escaped poverty. You are someone who appropriated poverty's aesthetics while living in the geographical and financial bubble of privilege. The vice president then addressed the philosophical flaw inherent in her entire political model, the idea that rhetorical performance is the ultimate goal. Your political philosophy, Congresswoman, is one of anti-meritocracy. You argue that success is determined by systems of oppression, not by individual effort, discipline, or education. You preach that the economy is a zero-sum game of exploitation. This fundamentally rejects the reality that lifted me out of poverty, the ability of hard work and education to transcend circumstance. When you propose paying the unwilling to work, you are not defending the poor. You are dismantling the very structure of opportunity, the meritocratic ladder, that I and millions of others used to climb out of destitution. Vance brought the debate back to the tangible evidence of her luxury life. He displayed the Met Gala photo again, this time juxtaposed with the humble home of his grandparents, image contrasting the Met Gala gown with a modest Appalachian house. The truth is visible in the architecture of our lives. My success led me to invest in my community and live modestly. Because the memory of scarcity is a permanent anchor, your success, driven by media celebrity, led you to a math BF, $35 party in a designer gown and a math BF, $2.800 luxury apartment. You have become the living embodiment of the wealthy elite who talk passionately about the poor but live entirely insulated from their reality. You are the embodiment of performance privilege. The conclusion of this segment was a stark, moral appeal to the American ideal of achievement. The people of this country need leaders who believe in the redemptive power of work, education, and earned success. They need leaders who understand that wealth is created, not simply redistributed, and that results matter more than retweets. Your career, Congresswoman, is a 6-year exercise in proving that credentials without competence leads to economic sabotage, and privilege disguised as poverty leads to moral exploitation. I earned my seat at this table by surviving the poverty you perform. I earned the right to debate you by passing legislation while you passed zero. The American people must choose between the meritocratic reality that I represent and the performative privilege that you have monetized. The profound contrast, backed by property records, military service records, and academic achievements, left the Congresswoman with no viable counter-narrative, as the facts of her comfortable upbringing and subsequent luxurious lifestyle were now permanently embedded against the backdrop of her failed policies. Vice President Vance, having systematically disassembled every pillar of the Congresswoman's brand and record across 6 devastating segments, stood for his final summation. He gathered the entire dossier of evidence, the economic charts, the legislative scorecards, the luxury apartment documentation, and the Met Gala photos, and arranged them into a single, cohesive timeline of failure. This was the final, inescapable indictment, the ultimate verdict on a career of theatrical politics. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, we have arrived at the conclusion of this necessary debate. The question before the American people is not about ideology, it is about competence, integrity, and results. We have spent 2 hours analyzing the empirical evidence of your 6 years in the United States Congress. And the conclusion is not partisan, it is mathematical, ethical, and legislative. Vance began the rapid-fire summary, building momentum with each point, each one a nail in the coffin of her political credibility. First, the economic fantasy. You possess an economics degree, yet you proposed the Green New Deal, a program costing an estimated math BF, $93 trillion, a figure that is mathematically impossible. Defying the basic principles of scarcity and arithmetic taught in any text, Econ, $101 class. Your policies are not solutions, they are expensive, unfeasible slogans. Your credentials proved useless because you deliberately chose slogan over science. Second, the economic sabotage. You used your social media influence to single-handedly kill the Amazon HQ2 project, costing your own constituents math BF, $25,000 direct jobs, math BF, $50,000 total job opportunities, and math BF, $5 billion in net new tax revenue for New York. This was not a victory for the working class, it was an act of economic destruction committed to maintain your anti-corporate brand narrative. You chose brand maintenance over constituent welfare. Third, the hypocrisy of lifestyle. You market yourself as the working class champion while residing in a luxury math BF, $2,800 DC apartment, wearing custom designer gowns to math BF, $35 elite parties, and previously driving a math BF, $60 car. You are not fighting the elite, you have joined them and are mocking the working class by wearing their struggle as a political costume. You chose elite consumption over class authenticity. Fourth, the moral exploitation. You used the suffering of your own grandmother's damaged home in Puerto Rico for political leverage against an administration. When public charity offered math BF, $100 to fix the damage, you rejected it for political reasons, and then failed to fix the damage yourself despite your substantial salary. You chose political narrative over family obligation. Fifth, the legislative failure. As a leader of the squad, you have spent 6 years in Congress, amassing math BF, $14 million followers. Yet your legislative record boasts math BF, $0 major bills passed into law. You have repeatedly voted against vital bipartisan infrastructure and economic aid packages because they did not meet your maximalist purity test. You chose outrage production over legislative outcomes. Vance paused, letting the weight of the 5-point indictment settle. He then offered the final, devastating contrast, encapsulating the difference between his philosophy and hers. The disparity between our careers, Congresswoman, is the difference between math BF, meritocracy, and math BF, performance privilege, I climbed out of generational poverty through the disciplined path of military service, hard-earned education, and results-driven governance. I have created jobs, passed legislation, and delivered tangible relief to communities that desperately need it. I know what poverty is, and I know what it takes to escape it. You, by contrast, leveraged a privileged start and an unused degree into a political brand, prioritizing viral content and celebrity status over the difficult, essential work of governing. Your career is not one of public service. It is one of math BF, self-service, that relies entirely on an audience that conflates passion with policy. The Vice President's voice rose, his final words echoing through the silent hall. America deserves leaders who are anchored in reality, who understand economics, and who prioritize results for their constituents. We need people who pass laws, not people who merely post content. We need substance, not style. We need governance, not performance art. Your record, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, is a clear, 6-year warning against the dangers of electing an influencer to a legislative seat. Your time has been a catastrophic waste of institutional power and a deep betrayal of the working people you claim to represent. Vance looked directly into the main camera for his closing statement to the nation. The era of the social media politician must end. The American people are tired of the soundbites. They're tired of the posturing. They're tired of the dollar, math BF, $93 trillion fantasies. They want jobs. They want infrastructure. They want solvency. And the evidence presented tonight proves, beyond any reasonable doubt, that only one vision, the vision based on merit, discipline, and results, can deliver that future. The performance is over. Reality has won. The silence that followed was absolute. The audience had not witnessed a debate, they had witnessed an execution. The 6-minute opening had stretched into a 2-hour, systematic deconstruction, and the outcome was undeniable. The myth of the performance politician had collapsed under the weight of her own non-existent legislative record and the crushing arithmetic of her failed policies. The era of zero laws passed was finally being held accountable.